We continue on in our discussion, taking a look at efforts to expand the Supreme Court with Mike Davis. He is the founder and president of the Article 3 Project. He also served as the former chief counsel for nominations in the Senate Judiciary Committee from 2017 to 2019. Mr. Davis, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Can we start a little bit about your group, its activities, and how you're funded?
Yeah, so I run the Article 3 Project, or A3P, and we fight for a judiciary that follows the rule of law. So we fight for judges who interpret the law, apply the law as written or textualism and as understood by the public at the time of that law's enactment or originalism. We don't like judicial activism, whether it's on the left or the right. We think judges have a limited but critical role of interpreting the law and not writing the law. And we are funded by small donors. You can go to article3project.org, article number 3project.org, and that's how people all over America can make small dollar donations.
Where do you and your organization fall on this idea of expanding the number of justices on the Supreme Court?
We firmly oppose court packing. We see this as a power grab by Democrats, and we see it as a radical assault on judicial independence. We have had 9 Supreme Court justices, 9 seats on the Supreme Court since 1869, more than 150 years ago, right after the Civil War. We saw in 1937, during the height of President FDR's presidency, he tried to pack the Supreme Court. It failed. It failed spectacularly. He lost support even among his own party. They saw it as a power grab. You saw the late Justice Ginsburg, the lioness of the left, come out and made the highly unusual public denouncement of court packing because it is so extreme, it's so political. And recently, Justice Breyer, as you discussed with Brian Fallon earlier, Justice Breyer came out and opposed court packing because it will politicize the court. So you have 2 of the last 4 Democrat-appointed Supreme Court justices making the highly unusual public denouncements of court packing. And that's really all you need to know.
The previous guest, Mr. Fallon, had made the case back in 1869 that the number of seats expanded, if I'm correct, went to the idea of federal circuit courts and made the case maybe that's applicable this time. Do you see anything in that argument?
Actually, that argument's just completely wrong. The federal courts of appeals were not even established by Congress until 1891. Supreme Court justices used to ride circuit, meaning they got on their horses and rode around the country before 1891, before the federal courts of appeals came along to assist the Supreme Court with appeals. So no, that is not applicable at all. And if you look at the number of circuits, we've had 13 circuits for a long time. Where were these Democrat operatives calling for the court packing when we've had 13 circuits for a long time? This is purely a political power grab. What's happening here is that we have the first true constitutionalist majority on the Supreme Court in more than 80 years. President Trump appointed Justices Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett, and now we have a 6-3 Republican-appointed Supreme Court, and now these judges are actually going to follow the law instead of rewrite the law. And Democrats don't like this. They've lost their grip on the Supreme Court. It's the final stop. It's the final backstop to stop Democrats from full, total control in our country. They have the White House, they have the Senate, they have the House. The one thing that's keeping them in check is an independent Supreme Court and federal judiciary, and they don't like that, so they want to change the rules.
You probably then are aware of this legislative effort by Representative Ed Markey and others to talk about Senator Ed Markey and others to expand the number of the court. They appeared in front of the court to make their case. I want you to listen to a little bit of what they had to say and then get your response to it.
The Republicans stole 2 seats on the Supreme Court, and now it is up to us to repair that damage. Our democracy is in jeopardy today because the Supreme Court's standing is sorely damaged. And the way we repair it is straightforward. We undo the damage that the Republicans have done by restoring balance. And we do it by adding 4 seats to the court to create a 13-member Supreme Court. These 4 new seats, to be filled by President Biden, will reconstitute the United States Supreme Court. The bench will then rightly reflect the values of the majority of the American people on whose behalf they serve. Expanding the court is constitutional. Congress has done it before, and Congress must do it again. We must expand the court, and we must abolish the filibuster to do it. The words etched above the main entrance of the Supreme Court building behind us express the ultimate responsibility of the court: equal justice under the law. But how will there be equal justice when seats on the court have been stolen? How will there be equal justice when Republicans have purposefully warped and weaponized the highest court of the land for their own partisan gain?
Mr. Davis, your response to those arguments?
I would just make a response that the American people do not support this. There have been 6 Democrat senators who have come out and voiced displeasure about this. We have West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, Arizona Senator Kristen Sinema, Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, Nevada Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, Hawaii Senator Brian Schatz, and Virginia Senator Tim Kaine. And so we have 6 of the 50 Democrat senators who have come out and suggested this is a bad idea. There's not support for this in the Senate. There's not support for this, a popular support for this. You have to remember that Brian Fallon and his group Demand Justice were the group that brought the Me Too allegations against then Judge Kavanaugh in 2018, and it helped 4 Democrat senators into early retirement. The voters of these 4 Democrat senators sent them into early retirement in 2018 over the Me Too fight with Judge Kavanaugh. We saw Brian Fallon and Demand Justice pushing the defund the police narrative in 2020 that cost Democrats several very winnable seats in the Senate all over the country. And then now in 2022, Brian Fallon and Demand Justice want to run on pack the court. So as a political matter, Republicans should welcome this because it's not going to end well for Democrats.
Our guest is with us, 202-748-8001 for Republicans, 202-748-8000 for Democrats, and then 202-748-8002 for Independents. If you want to text us your thoughts for our guest, 202-748-8003. You can post on Twitter and Facebook, too. Mr. Davis, one more argument about this idea of expanding. This came from Nan Aaron for the Alliance of Justice. In part, she wrote this, saying the majority of the justices on the court were nominated by presidents who lost the popular vote. Over the past 4 years, we saw 2 of those seats stolen to stack the court with ultra-conservative justices with a partisan agenda. Expanding the number of justices and seizing the opportunity to nominate diverse, forward-thinking jurists will democratize the highest court in the land so it can properly uphold the rights of all Americans. What do you think about those thoughts, particularly those last thoughts?
Well, first of all, the Constitution is such that the president is the person who nominates these justices. The Senate confirms that it doesn't matter how they won, whether it was a landslide or a slim majority or less than a slim majority. That's how the Constitution works. Now, you have to understand what the Democrats are trying to do here. They don't like that these judges are a check on their power. And if we pack the Supreme Court, if we politicize the Supreme Court, they call it democratize. If we politicize the Supreme Court, then everyday Americans need to worry about our First Amendment rights to speak, to associate, to worship, our Second Amendment rights to protect ourselves. Those rights will very much be on the line if we have a politicized Supreme Court filled with liberal judicial activists.
Let's start with Mary. Mary on our independent line, Fort Myers, Florida. You're on with our guest, Mike Davis of the Article 3 Project. Mary, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call. I listened to both of the gentlemen speaking about the Supreme Court. Personally, I don't think there's anything supreme about the Supreme Court. There's no separation between church and state, nothing like that. And they're always in hiding. They hardly work. We don't know. They should be, like every politician from local all the way up the line, should be punching a clock like every other taxpayer. And they should be accountable for the hours that they spend. And how much of our tax dollars pays all of these people for their health care, their vacation, all this other stuff, and their security.
So, Mary, what do you think about this idea of expanding the Supreme Court?
I'm against it because why don't they all go away? Because I don't think the Supreme Court does anything.
Okay, you made that point, Mary. We'll let our guests respond.
You know, it's unfortunate that we have these groups like Demand Justice, Brian Fallon, Chris King, attacking the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. There is a lot of popular support in this country for the Supreme Court, for judicial independence, for the rule of law. It's what separates America from banana republics, because we know that we have a judiciary that's independent of the political branches. And what court packing would do is just turn the federal judiciary into another political branch. And so it would destroy our federal courts. It would destroy the Supreme Court. And maybe that's their plan. I don't know, but that would be the effect.
A couple of times in the last segment, I think the guest and maybe even a caller referred to the idea that the court's acting more like a legislative body. Would you agree?
I mean, if you look at how the Supreme Court has ruled, over the last 80 years, you've seen the Supreme Court rewrite statutes and create rights out of thin air. And when it was a liberal court doing this, you didn't hear groups like Demand Justice, like Brian Fallon, complaining about this. It's only recently that President Trump appointed Justice Gorsuch, Justice Kavanaugh, and Justice Barrett. You finally brought the court back into alignment of what the Constitution says and what the public understood the Constitution to mean. You're bringing it back into that alignment. You're starting to hear these left-wing groups, these radical left-wing groups call for radical change.
Memphis, Tennessee is where Dan is. Democrats line. Hi.
How you doing?
You're on. Go ahead.
He tried to politicize the Supreme Court. The Republicans already politicized the Supreme Court. They denied Barack Obama's nominee. That's all I got to say. This man is a fraud.
So, Dan, what do you think about this idea of expanding the Supreme Court? Oh, he hung up. Anything to that, Mr. Davis, you wanted to respond to?
I think he was talking about Judge Garland's nomination to the Supreme Court by President Obama during an election year. And I would just say that in the Senate, they follow the 90% rule. When the Senate is the same party as the president, 90% of the time they will confirm a Supreme Court justice during a presidential election year. When the Senate is the opposite party of the president, 90% of the time they won't. And it's just, that's historically how it's happened. And so, with Judge Garland, we had President Obama, a Democrat, and you had a Republican-controlled Senate. And the Senate Republicans said that we're going to let the American people weigh in with the election and decide how they want to fill that Supreme Court seat. And during that election, the American people voted for President Trump and the American people voted for a Republican-controlled Senate. So the American people spoke, and now we have Justice Gorsuch.
From Riverside, California, this is David, Republican line. Good morning.
Good morning. The last guest said the conservatives are a 6-3 supermajority, but that's assuming Roberts is consistently voting conservative, which he's not. And then Gorsuch authored the opinion recently changing the 1964 Civil Rights Act to include homosexuality in the workplace, which was way off for 1964. But it's true. They would have never thought of that in 1964. I agree with that. And the only real dependable ideologues are the liberals. If the Democrats can do it, why won't Republicans do the same thing? Pick 5 next time. We're headed for a constitutional crisis, I think, because we keep messing with everything, like the filibuster, ruining the great traditions of our country. What are we if we change everything that we are? Democrats say we love the Constitution, now let's change it. Not through amendments, which is what the Constitution says you can do. They want to change it through getting liberal members on the court, which is really sick. And Roosevelt did this in the 1930s, as your guest mentioned, and nobody liked it. And he actually inspired a constitutional amendment saying you could only have 2 terms as president after that because he had 4.
Okay, that's David in California. Mr. Davis, go ahead.
I would just say this notion that the court is politicized, I think, is just wrong. And and I think there are a lot of demagogues out there who are pushing this notion because they want to grab power. If you look at the Supreme Court, they hear for oral argument less than 100 cases per year. These are the hardest cases in the country that have split federal courts all over America. They get to the Supreme Court, and there are 9 justices of different backgrounds from different parts of the country with different judicial philosophies. And I'd have to go back and look at the number, but it's like 90+% of the time there is a near unanimity among the 9 justices for these rulings. So it's just we hear about the high profile cases, but the day-to-day operation of the court, I'll tell you, I clerked for Justice Gorsuch on the Supreme Court. It's not political. It's not a super Senate there. It is 9 good people trying to figure out what the law is based upon their judicial philosophy and just trying to do a good job and do what's right, and they work very hard.
Here's a viewer off of Twitter who suggests this, saying that Supreme Court, the justice I'm assuming referring to, should never again have lifetime appointments. I don't care what the founders thought about this topic. They didn't provide voting rights for Black Americans or women. Life expectancy was way lower. It's time for an overhaul of this archaic institution. What about this idea of changing the lifetime tenureship?
Well, lifetime tenure is in the Constitution, and there's a reason for that. We want to insulate the judges, the federal judiciary, from politics. And there's a reason for that. Think about that. If you're going before a judge as a litigant, we're all supposed to be equal in the eyes of the law. And if you have a political judge who's worried about his next job or worried about Congress, we have pay protection too. So you have lifetime tenure and pay protection. So we don't want judges worried about their next job. We don't want judges trying to curry favor to get their next job. We don't want judges worried about having their pay cut if they rule the wrong way. The founders were very smart about this. And the reason is as a party, you don't want your case decided based upon political considerations. You want your case decided based upon the law. You want to feel like you got a fair shake. And if you have judges who are worried about job security or pay, it's an assault on judicial independence, and we don't want to do that. That's why court packing is so wrong. It's so against everything that we have stood for as a country. We want an independent federal judiciary that is not politicized, and court packing does the opposite.
Our guest served as the chief counsel for nominations at the Senate Judiciary Committee from 2017 to 2019. What does that job involve, and were you involved with then President Trump's nominees? I was.
So I worked for then Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley from my home state of Iowa, and I was one of his lawyers, one of his aides last Congress, and it was my job to help then Chairman Chuck Grassley vet President Trump's judicial nominees, and we certainly were not a rubber stamp. There were 5 nominees who then Chairman Grassley sent packing. They didn't get through the process. It's a vigorous process, and it's it's again they were not a rubber stamp. There were Senator Grassley helped President Trump set records for the number of judges that were confirmed in a president's term. But it was because President Trump did such a good job of picking and nominating highly qualified nominees, and the Senate made it a top priority.
Here's Jack. Jack is from Maine in Mechanics Falls. This is on our Democrats line. Hello, Mechanic Falls.
Hey, good morning. Nice to get through to you. Love the show. So the gentleman was talking about court packing, and the first comment I have is, of course, that's exactly what President Trump did. I'm sure he's going to want to debate that with me. I'll stay right on the line for that one. But also, they're still talking about liberal judges and conservative judges. And the last time I called in about this subject, I was saying that there shouldn't be either. They should all be neutral, like is said in the Constitution, or implied that they should be. But, of course, they're not. And why would the Republicans be trying so hard? And why did they succeed in packing the court if they believe that it's all supposed to be neutral? I got about another 3 hours that I could discuss this, but I'll let it go for now. I'm just glad I got through, and I really love the way you run the show. Thank you so much. Bye.
Jack in Maine, Democrats line. Mr. Davis, go ahead.
So it's 2 points on court packing. So filling existing vacancies is never court packing. And so the Democrats are trying to change the definition of court packing because they know it's radical, and they know that the American people don't support it. They know that even Democrats in the Senate, the 6 that I named earlier, don't support this. So instead of, so when you're filling existing vacancies, that's not court packing. Let's just make that very clear. And I agree with Jack from Maine that we should not have conservative judges. We should not have liberal judges. We should have judges who look at the law, look at the plain text of the law, textualism, and then look at what that text meant to the public, at the time that that law was enacted, originalism, and let the chips fall where they may. So if it is a liberal law, you get to a liberal result. And if it is a conservative law, you get to a conservative result. It is the job of our elected officials in Congress to write the law. We can hold them accountable. We can throw them out of office if we don't like the laws that they write. Our unelected judges, unelected, lifetime appointed, pay-protected federal judges should never be writing the laws.
All right, here's Eddie, Los Angeles, California, independent line.
Good morning. I think, first of all, that anybody that's in government or controls or have some type of say-so over the mass of us should have term limits, period. If they're worried about work, then they should be able to do a pretty good job of what they're doing. Because under that philosophy, we shouldn't have term limits for any of our politicians if they're scared of their next job. But this is the thing. The Supreme Court is not supposed to bring emotions, political, religious. All they're supposed to do is say two words, yes or no. Is this constitutional? Yes or no. Whatever your theory, whatever your thoughts, your religion on that situation, that's personal. Yes or no. And they're steadily making law. That's wrong. And plus, like I said, they go with the political climate. That's how come the Democrats want this guy, because he's going to listen. The words are just no emotion whatsoever. Follow the words, man. Yes.
Okay. Thanks, caller.
No.
Thank you.
I mean, I agree. Judges should just follow the words, and that's exactly right. Judges should do that, and I think that's the problem is that when you have these judicial activists, they tend to be on the left, but you also have judicial activists on the right. You politicize these courts. Again, the job of a judge, it's a very modest job, but it's a very critical job. It is to say what the law is, and that's it. Just what is the law? And be fair, be impartial. Don't take political sides. Just figure out what the law is, apply the law, and that's their job.
What do you think is the likelihood of this actually happening? And I only ask because in the last guest we talked about how several Democrats already have been hesitant to this idea, as well as this commission being formed by President Biden.
I mean, the fact that we are even considering such a radical assault on judicial independence like court packing it's just extreme. It's amazing to me that there are actually Democrats in the House and Democrats in the Senate who are a maybe on this. I mean, this should be an open and shut case of heck no, this is a radical assault on judicial independence. This will politicize the Supreme Court and destroy the federal judiciary. And that means that the job of a judge is to protect everyday Americans, our individual rights from government overreach and from mob rule. And if you destroy the Supreme Court by packing it, by politicizing it, that is going to harm our individual rights. Like I said, our First Amendment right to speak, to associate, to worship, our Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms in self-defense. There are many, many rights, our Fourth Amendment rights, our due process rights, criminal procedure rights. There are many rights that are on the line if you have a politicized Supreme Court. You do not want Supreme Court justices just going with popular opinion. And a good example of that is Brown versus Board of Education. School integration was not popular back when Brown versus Board of Education was decided, but they made the right decision. And they didn't have to worry about their job. They didn't have to worry about having their pay cut. They just needed to understand that the separate but equal doctrine in Plessy versus Ferguson was wrong, and Brown versus Board of Education fixed that.
Here's Tina, Pennsylvania, Republican line.
Hi, good morning, Pedro. Hello, Mike. How are you? Look, I'm not any type of paraprofessional by any means, but I just want to say something, not a basic comment to some of the callers I've heard. What Donald Trump did when he was president of the United States was not court packing. He filled vacancies. Totally different thing. Justice is supposed to be blind in this country. And if we start packing the Supreme Court and we start getting all of these, look at what's happening in Minnesota and Chicago. They're going to court. They're being let out. They're doing it again. I sat and watched last night a live stream from North Carolina from a YouTuber, and I actually called the police down there and said, look, they're talking about bringing guns to this. If we would just get rid of our labels as Democrat, as Republican, and start acting like we did on September 12th of 2001, we were Americans. We need to come together, put the BS aside, and save our nation. We all live by God's rule, and that's the Constitution, and I will not have my rights infringed upon because someone is misreading the Constitution just like they misread the Bible.
Okay, Tina, we'll let our guests respond to that.
I would just want to frame this way. We look at what Democrats are trying to do. They won the White House. They barely won the Senate 50-50 with Kamala Harris breaking the tie. There is not a mandate by the American people for radical change in this country. President Biden did not campaign on that, and the American people didn't elect Democrats to bring about revolutionary change. And look at what the Democrats are trying to do. They want to pass H.R. 1, which would federalize elections all over the country, and make it where Democrats are almost certain to win and keep power forever. Then you have things like court packing, where they want to add justices to the Supreme Court so they can jam through their political agenda unchecked by an independent federal judiciary. They're talking about adding D.C. as a state, maybe Puerto Rico, with 2 new Democrat senators in each state. Heck, where does it end? We have 5 territories. Do we add 5 new states with 10 new Democrat senators? This court packing, this H.R. 1, these new states that Democrats are talking about. This is a pure political power grab to ensure that they have total control, that they win elections forever, and there's no one to check their power. It is dangerous. It is a radical assault on judicial independence. It is a threat to our rights, to our liberties. And fortunately, the American people do not support court packing. And fortunately, at least 6 Democrat senators have come out and voiced strong concerns about it.
Let's hear quickly from Thomas, Washington, D.C. Thomas, go ahead. We're running short on time.
Really quick question, 2 questions. Answer them in whatever order you so choose. Is there any way to hold Mitch McConnell accountable for the way in which he kind of upped the ante to prevent this kind of polarization between the partisan sides? And is there any way to prevent the court from being politicized going forward?
I would just say on McConnell, remember back in 2013, the Democrats nuked the filibuster, meaning they lowered the vote threshold in the Senate from 60 to 51, so they can add 4 Obama-appointed liberals to the D.C. circuit, the second highest court in the land. And so to blame then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell for confirming President Trump's judges is just wrong. We were following historical precedent. My boss is former Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley. We followed historical precedent. We followed the norms. You have Democrats who thought it was unreasonable to require 60 votes to confirm President Obama's nominees, yet you had groups like Demand Justice, Brian Fallon, Chris Kang out there telling Democrats to #resist every single one of President Trump's judicial nominees. So it's just political games that we're hearing about. And how you depoliticize the federal judiciary is let judges do their jobs. You don't threaten to pack the Supreme Court. You don't threaten to impeach them like they've done with Justice Kavanaugh. You don't threaten to take away their jurisdiction. You don't threaten term limits. You let judges do their job and stop politicizing this.
Mike Davis of the Article 3 Project, article3project.org, the website. And Mr. Davis, thanks for your time.
Thank you.